how many great ideas we've tried with sincerity and effort over the last 7 years that have not panned out. In fact, have made the situation worse. The idea that we would enter into an agreement that's based on services that have traditionally not panned out in terms of cash flow is kind of horrifying to me. The capital issues have been dealt with and addressed. They're profound and overwhelming. They are not addressed in this plan, other than to say that it would be an ongoing responsibility of the district to raise the money for the capital improvements. So that's a huge thing that needs to be done. And the assumption is that this board is going to go out and do the fundraising to meet all of those capital needs. I think is also not realistic. So I think the financial stuff has got a lot of problems, and I don't think these are details. I don't think it's the devil is in the detail, kind of don't worry, we can manage it. The second one is issues around personnel. We've heard about you've heard about our staff's concern about conflict of interest. Some of it has been addressed. It could be that this is one of those details that the foundation simply says, okay, there won't be anybody in those positions that have a conflict of interest, but that practically removes the entire executive team that's being proposed for this proposal. That's the CFO, that's the CEO, and a number of the positions that are on both would be both wearing two hats. Excuse me. So maybe it could be addressed, but I think it fundamentally and profoundly changes the ability of this team to deliver what they're proposing, is to rip out, again, the core of the executive team. I would also say that in my research, I've discovered that, it's probably no big deal in the end, but I just think it's indicative that the offer of a electronic medical records service from Harmony MD, which is part of Dr. Booth's conflict of interest, also presents a conflict of interest because the billing service that's being proposed, EA Health, the CEO of EA Health is also on the board of directors of Harmony MD. So there's another conflict. Does that mean that the billing service that would be proposed would be in conflict? Those can be not insignificant issues that really need to be dealt with. And as I think Marsha R. Sanders said, this board has had issues of conflict of interest right along this point in years past. So I don't know if it could be negotiated, and I find a good deal of concern about that. Also, I was surprised that the proposal, and I think Jim Horn brought this up, I was surprised that the proposal didn't have the resumes of the key volunteers who are going to run this operation. I run on personnel issues something that really concerns me. The proposal says that Palm Drive Healthcare Foundation, the proposal is Palm Drive Healthcare Foundation would provide the management of the hospital operations with foundation employees. In this model, all other employees remain employed by the district. I would turn to our council. Does that mean we're responsible if the foundation doesn't pay payroll taxes, or are we responsible? I mean, those folks are employees of this district. How does that work?
Your responsibility.
It's our responsibility. So we are managing these people. We are running the facility. There's even an HR person that's indicated in the proposal, but we are the people that they're employed by. So there's a real disconnect in terms of our ability to manage a staff that we have no control over. To me, this kind of thing is not a detail. This is what the heck is going on here. And the final thing that I would say, and I would say this is the biggest one to me because I don't think this is negotiable. The proposal basically, I believe one of the proposers used the word, we need a firewall. So the proposal is that there's a firewall between the foundation running the hospital and the district, which is morally, ethically, and legally responsible for the running of this hospital. There's the concept that there has to be a firewall between, I'm sorry, I'm still liable and responsible, and somebody wants to build a firewall. That's the management structure that's being proposed. The proposal says they're going to meet with the legally responsible organization 4 times a year. 4 times a year, we can hardly do our business. obviously, meeting monthly. So I think, and I don't think that's negotiable, I think that is at the heart of what this proposal is all about, is to create a separate structure that has the ability to try and make it work, but leaving all of the big bills, the bankruptcy and so on the district, the hiring, the responsibility for the staff, as well as that is the idea. And I don't think that's a detail, and I don't think that's negotiable. I can't support this proposal.
Okay. Well, I guess I have similar concerns as Nancy pointed out, and I won't review them all, go through them all. Some of them are the same, but I guess I do feel that I do recognize the effort that went into this and the opportunity for us to sit down and work through some of those issues. I think there are some, I would agree, I don't believe they're detailed. Some are details, some are significant. But I would also take the foundation at their word that they are anxious to sit and work with us. So I'm not interested in these motions that John presented, but I would be interested in sitting down and working with the foundation to try to make this thing work.
I'm prepared to make a motion for that.
Okay.
I move that we designate the foundation as the successful applicant and immediately enter into negotiations to see if we can resolve the remaining issues as quickly as possible.
Does that include keeping the hospital open, or does that have the hospital closed on the 28th as planned?
It depends on how far we got by Sunday. I could see that going either way.
Okay.
If we can get far enough, it can stay open. If we can't, it may have to close for a short period of time.
We don't have a second. Come on.
I'll second the motion.
You'll sleep well tonight.
I have a question. So the whole board for the next 3 or 4 days negotiates with the foundation to work out as much of the substance as possible.
I would say that would not primarily be the board. I think the chair and the CEO and whatever other resources they think need to be at the table. I think what needs to happen is get the big table and get everybody around it and then start banging on the issues. We may get there, we may not get there by Sunday. But I know we won't get there if we don't try.
That's what I was thinking, that we would, myself and Sandra, if you were available, but we would sit down with Tom and people. I think I agree with Nancy. I think there are significant issues. But I also think that, and I think it's unlikely that we're going to get those done. One of them is whatever issues we have with the state. I don't think we're going to get that done by the end of the month. But I think we can start this process and
Yeah, I would just say, as you're thinking about that, to encourage you to read the last paragraph in our staff report. Please be aware that the Board of Directors is obligated to direct management to meet federal and state quality assurance mandates during the period of fiscal crisis, including the safety and quality of care of present or potential clients who might be impacted. I think that our management, I would like to hear either from Tom or from Colin, what needs to happen if we close on the 28th, on this Sunday. What needs to happen between now and then? In other words, does Tom have time to be negotiating, or do we need to be focusing on the safe and orderly closure of the hospital?
You want to answer the time issue? You have to be focused
on the safety and well-being of your patients and potential future patients.
Microphone.
You can repeat that.
What Colin said was that we have to be focused on the health and safety of our present and future patients. That's what we have to focus our time on. So pointing that out to the board, I would suggest that if the majority of the board is interested in negotiating with the foundation, that we close the hospital in a safe and orderly fashion, as we have already moved to do, and then enter into negotiations that are not in danger of making serious violations or health and safety issues in these last 5 days of the hospital.
Would you do that as a friendly amendment?
I would make that as a friendly amendment, I would make it as a friendly amendment that we proceed with the closing of the hospital on April 28th as we planned, and simultaneously and immediately thereafter, I should say, immediately thereafter, that our administration and chair enter into negotiations with the foundation that will last no longer than a month. And I guess, so that would be my motion. Let me bring up one other thing, is for that to, yeah, I think that's good. That's what we need.
Point of order, point of order.
That's friendly amendment.
I need that as a friendly, I offered it, but
Yeah, I would prefer you to leave that open, so I would not accept that as a friendly amendment. We can vote on it as an amendment.
You lose the PR if you get that.
We're not taking any more public comment.
I happen to be one of the people that you're talking to.
Yeah, the proper thing is to vote on the amendment first and then the motion. Unless anybody else has comments.
Two separate things.
It's no more likely that you will be able to resuscitate.
We're not going to take public comment. We're not taking public comment.
Resuscitate a
We
hospital.
have,
I would be able to stop your resuscitation in the emergency room
Please.
and expect 10 minutes later to
no,
be able to get you
we
back.
had a public comment. We're in a process here. It's very clear that our instructions are the process we have to go through for closure of the hospital. That doesn't preclude, as we've said all along, having some other plan that we start going with from the foundation.
Those are two different motions.
29.
I know I think we need to vote on that motion, but I still have questions about the process of negotiation. But if you want to first do the vote on the friendly amendment.
So the amendment that Nancy made, if you want to restate that. Where's Gail? Gail, do you have that? Okay. So we'll vote on this amendment. 4 and 1. So 4-1. Did you get that, Gail? Okay, now.
So I need to understand the responsibilities of those negotiating, and if that negotiation comes back to board under your motion.
Well, a contract would have to come back to the board. Yeah, but we didn't. Well, yes, the negotiating team that Chris appoints would come back to the board with a recommended contract.
I don't want to be clear that there are some, the particular issue. I would want to be sure that the particular issues were resolved to my satisfaction, and make sure that will.
My expectation is that this will all come back to the board very quickly, and this is not a decision for one of us to make, so that you and I would start as soon as the foundation is ready, and we'll start figuring things out. It doesn't preclude Tom from doing what he needs to do, and we'll keep the process going.
Who would be from you have a subcommittee from the board negotiating that?
I'd like it to be Sandra and I, because you got some travel time and other stuff in there too.
And Sandra is the most medically educated among us.
Okay, so I think it's clear about. So Jim, do you want to restate your motion?
Let Nancy.
Yeah, Nancy should state the motion because it includes her amendment. Or maybe we could have Gail read it back to us? Can you read it to us as amended?
The amendment is to proceed with closing on the 28th and immediately thereafter, the chair and administration enter into negotiations not to last longer than 1 month.
My understanding was that the negotiations were going to start immediately, not wait. Is that correct?
Right,
Be simultaneous. That was the first motion.
The first motion was to begin negotiations immediately without a designation to close. The amendment said the closing proceeding, the negotiations would proceed, but the closing would also proceed. And it would reopen as soon as the negotiations were completed.
They shouldn't
That's
be
my
late.
understanding of what the motion as amended states.
They shouldn't be late.
Okay, so we'll call the vote. So all those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay, so the motion carried 5-0.